Hello, everyone, and welcome to this chat about engaging primary students in STEM. My name's Lisa Harvey-Smith. I'm a professor of practice at the University of New South Wales, and today my very special guest is Professor Therese Keane from the University, La Trobe University, and we are going to have a wonderful chat today. Welcome, Therese. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Lisa. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Hey, that's a snazzy background you got there. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah. So the background really speaks to what I do. And so basically, this is a robotics lab, and a lot of the work I've done over the years has involved educational robots, from humanoid robots, social robots, educational robots, such as Lego and other little bits and pieces, Ozbots. So, this really speaks to me. So when I put myself in the robotics lab, so to speak, as you can see, on my robotics workshop, I'm immersed in that. So I feel that I'm still part of my work, even though it's virtual.
That's very cool. What's a social robot? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, look, the new social robots are really taking off, and so I've got a social robot which is a bust. So it sort of is from the top and the head is real. So it projects a real image onto the face, and it has a conversation with you, being social, and it's powered by AI. You can have a chat with it, and in this case, with my robot, I can make it friendly, I can make it confrontational, and so it can really have a conversation that's very natural and very social. So people in medicine are using it, or even in health. So they might have pre-screening of, say, diabetes. So before you see a diabetes specialist, you talk to the robot, and the robot might ask you, how often, do you feel thirsty? Or how often do you feel, unwell? And so, depending on your answer, it's a very conversational kind of conversation between the robot and the person. And depending on the answers, will depend on what person you see or who you see and what kind of treatment you get. So, it's that sort of pre-screening that is done by a social robot, as opposed to having somebody out as a human.
That's awesome. So it's kind of like a triage system. That sounds incredible. Well, I'd love to talk
Yeah.
more about robots, but I did want to know how you got, I mean, your career sounds amazing. How you got to where you are today as an educational researcher, a professor at La Trobe University. What's your educational background and how's your life sort of taking you to where you are today?
Yeah, look, Lisa, when I started in year nine, starting to think about careers, I really wanted to be a computer teacher. So I wanted to teach computing at years 11 and 12. And I went to an all-girls school. And when I did computing wasn't something girls did. That was the message that kept on coming back to us. And so I really wanted to be a computer science teacher. So when I was in year 12, my parents wouldn't let me out of that school. So I had to do computing on a Saturday at a TAFE. So I did 6 days of schooling. And then I went in and I did a 4-year Bachelor of Education, and I majored in, well, it was a science education, and I majored in mathematics and computer science. And then straight away, I teach 4 year 12 classes, and I was in an all boys school. So those boys were about 17, 18, and I was 21. So I was teaching 4 year 12 classes of IT. And by the second year of my teaching degree, I was involved in marking exams for the state. I was writing textbooks. And for the last 30 years, I've been involved in the VCE textbooks, writing of textbooks. So children in Victoria, or students in Victoria, use my textbook that I've been involved in. I've done a lot of work with subject associations, with the VCAA, which is the authority that marks papers. I've been involved in some of the work for the curriculum in the state as well, and at years 11 and 12. So I was a director of IT for many of those years, and I've worked my way through being in a school, obviously teaching, coordinator, leadership. And I did that for 17 years. And whilst I was actually teaching, I was at night studying. So I did my master's, my Doctor of Education, and I was also raising a child at the same time. And so by 2011, I got myself a position in a university. So I went in as a lecturer, and I was only there for a 12-month position. I didn't expect it to be any longer. And anyway, I guess the story is they liked me, I liked them, and my career took off. And about 12 years later, I became a professor. So I worked my way through promotion. And I moved in by about, I should say, when I started in 2011, I was in the faculty of ICT. And then by 2015, I moved into the Department of Education at the university. And I'm still in education, but I get to work with robots. I work with STEM. I work with children, teachers, and wonderful people, and robots, obviously. So, and virtual reality. So I get to play with all the technology that I'm used to, but I also now research it rather than teach it to kids.
Oh, that's incredible. Oh my goodness. What a career path. I mean, I often talk, when I'm talking with people about STEM career paths or other career paths, what a winding, exciting adventure it can be. And that really just highlights it for me, I think. What an incredible amount you've achieved in your career. I was particularly interested to talk about your report that you did, engaging primary girls in STEM. Um, and that highlights something that we know, which is that girls often have a really high interest in STEM and a natural interest in STEM, as all children do. But this tends to wane at particular ages as they grow older. I know Australian government figures showed that girls go into high school actually more engaged and more interested in STEM than boys on average. But then at a particular age, it sort of ticks down. So a lot of people are interested, particularly educators, on about when that happens and the reasons why that happens. So could you talk a little bit to that, please?
Yeah, look, the sweet spot is somewhere around grade 5 to year 8. And that is the sweet spot where, girls are really making decisions and looking around them and looking at the environment around them. And by about years, like from grade 5 to year 8, if they've had poor experiences or bad experiences with STEM, or they haven't really experienced it and it hasn't really made them, like the light bulb hasn't come on, it's not going to happen. And so girls make, with, I guess, at the same time of puberty as well and peer group pressure, girls start making, I guess, decisions, and they make judgments, and they start to say, I'm not good at this, or I don't enjoy this. And so that sweet spot is that year 5 to year 8. And by that stage, if they're really not interested or they haven't had an inspirational moment, that's where they turn off. And no amount of showing them wonderful things at school, at secondary school, really turns that clock back. So it's really, really important to try and get girls and boys to be engaged with STEM as young as possible.
Mm. Well, yeah, thank you. We always talk about that kind of that criticality of the primary school piece, and even in early childhood stages as well, actually understanding STEM, but also that not transmitting the maths anxiety and not doing the things that are going to put kids off and those stereotypes. What can educators watching actually do? And what can they think about in maybe those primary and earlier stages? Just those little things that we signal as adults. To actually encourage kids to develop that growth mindset and to stick with STEM and to see themselves in STEM.
Curiosity is one of the biggest things that educators can actually encourage kids to do. So, being curious about something, asking open ended questions. So, why do you think this is the case? Or what makes you think this? And getting them to really think about it and give hypotheses. It may not be right, it may be totally wacky, but encouraging kids to think outside of the box and then getting them to then test it out why it might be so or why it might not be right, and getting the kids to really feel empowered and to be part of it. I think that's really, that's the biggest, I think, takeaway from this. additionally, it's always good to get the kids involved to press buttons. And before they press buttons, they need to be able to articulate what do they think is going to happen and how did this process happen, and try to understand, get them to understand the process. So I guess what I have in mind is, for example, you might have a robot that moves from one part to another. So goes from point A to point B straight. But you don't tell the kids that. And you might say, what happens if I put the robot on the ground here? What happens if I press this button? And some kid might say, oh, it'll go straight. Or another one might say, I'll turn around. And you might then say, why is that? How did you get to that? And the kid might say, well, cars go straight. Or someone might say, well, I've seen my father program things and they goes in circles. And then, conversation then starts out very natural. But as an educator, ask questions. Why? How did you get that? And then perhaps, if you're confident enough, perhaps show them different programs or different ways of programming it. So yes, it can go straight. Yes, it can go around in circles, and perhaps demonstrate it so that they understand that there's not one wrong or right answer, but it's all about that curiosity. And it's almost like sort of picking out or picking off onion, layers and showing them. And once they're empowered, they're also engaged and their curiosity is satisfied, you'll find that children will be very much interested in what you have to show. And that whole science becomes natural. It's not an imposed curriculum onto them.
Yeah, that's it. It sort of reminds me of how Cambridge University do their entrance exams. It's not an exam as such, but they actually have a conversation with candidates and try and get them to solve a problem that's really complex. And they don't look at how you answer the question, they look at how you get there, and they actually have that conversation. And the journey is actually the answer. Like the
Yeah.
journey is the scientific method. And the answer, and I think the answer is not the most important thing. And what I worry about is when sometimes we forget that and we think of science as being having to know all the answers, or a sort of like a science communicator who kind of goes on the radio and talks about all the right answers to these difficult questions. It's actually a little bit counterproductive, I think, sometimes, because we're not highlighting that science is a method, that everything is a theory, and that hypothesizing is actually the real process of it. That's the beauty of science. And I wonder, how can we better support educators who might not have a scientific background, and they may be a primary teacher with a lot of different skill sets. They're learning the curriculum and the requirements, but like what sort of professional development activities are going to be helpful for a teacher in that situation?
Yeah, look, it's a difficult one because many of the primary school teachers who do go into primary school teaching are not scientists, as you said, or mathematicians or computer scientists. But as part of being a primary teacher, you have to teach across the board. So you have to know a little bit about everything, but you're not necessarily coming from a major or a discipline that is particularly one or another. And so having that self-interest is a very good start. Looking at the internet to see what kind of resources are out there, doing a lot of professional reading yourself, working with perhaps colleagues in a community of practice or a community of practice across a couple of schools, trying to find teachers who are very much STEM focused. And when I say STEM, we've got to be also very careful because in schools, people think of STEM as technology or digital technologies, and it's actually much wider than that. There's a science component, there's a mathematics component. Even though there is nothing in the curriculum called engineering, that is really the design tech side of things, and that's where that's where the building comes in and the designing work comes in. So we've really got to buddy up with people who have all these different aspects of STEM and really try and come up with integrated ways, particularly in primary school, to actually integrate this into the curriculum and understand, and for the teachers to understand it, but to also be ahead of the students and be comfortable in answering questions. A lot of the teachers that we've come across in previous, I guess, research, they're not necessarily comfortable with things such as complex scientific questions that the kids might answer, or sorry, might ask, and they're concerned that if they try and answer it, they will either dig themselves into a hole by saying something wrong, or they're just trying to avoid it altogether. But the best way to become a master in terms of your knowledge or a particular area is to actually read up. Pardon me, I'm losing my voice. To read up, to actually be across the content. You don't have to be a PhD in the content, but just read up and just find different ways of doing it. And look, if you're still not comfortable, or you're not, you can't find the people, there's the Science Teachers Associations in each state. There's also universities that have people like STEM educators, or they teach STEM to pre-service teachers. So there are different ways. Get in touch with people. Don't be on your own, because really we want to encourage children to take an interest and to love STEM, not to be put off them. And so teachers play a very important and crucial part in this whole process.
That's it. I've many, many hundreds of times. In fact, I've been into classrooms and as a scientist coming in to speak to young people. So I would say as well, don't be afraid to invite scientists into your classroom. There's a great database actually online called STEM Women. .org.au, I think it is. It's run by the academies and science academies, and it's great because you can find subject matter experts, particularly people from maybe underrepresented groups and women who are able to come into classrooms and are willing to come in as a subject matter expert, which is great fun. And I think that really helps young people, with the outlet to ask those difficult questions, but then the teacher also gets that sort of broader perspective into the classroom as well of someone in a profession. I did want to talk to you about that as well. Obviously careers education isn't really part of the curriculum either at a primary stage, or not too much explicitly. But as you know, at UNSW, we run a program called futureyouaustralia.com.au, and it's a free program. So I just wanted to let everyone know who's watching. It's suitable for around about middle grade, so around 8 to 12 years old, but probably a little bit beyond that as well. And what it does, it integrates the wonderful classroom resources, stories of diverse people working in STEM industries, from computer science to engineering to mathematicians, people who are chefs. And how's a chef to do with STEM? Well, you'll find out in Future You. And it really shows these role models and gives classroom teachers resources to integrate into the national curriculum in areas that might not be the STEM areas. And really interesting to think how we can integrate STEM, so learning about computing skills, learning about scientific and engineering principles, getting the maths into those other areas of the curriculum. What have you seen that's really great for doing that integration?
As in what, sorry, what resources have I seen?
I guess what techniques or what resources? I mean, is that important to sort of almost like, hiding broccoli on a pizza, like getting kids to eat their greens, putting STEM in different places?
Yeah, look, it is. And in primary school, it's really important to have integrated STEM rather than STEM silos. So rather than, like today we're going to study, science, and, next period we're going to do a bit of technology. It's more important to have a context and have all the different aspects, or as many of the different aspects of STEM as part of it. And the teacher can then incidentally say, okay, well, in this part here, this is what science is about, and talk a little bit about that, and then introduce it as, or this is the technology aspect. And look, in this field here, if you're, really interested, you could become a ... So you could become a computer programmer, or you could become a chef, or whatever it is. So it is very important. But schools, in particular in primary schools, they are into integrated, subjects and context. So it's about a topic and bringing in the curriculum elements. So finding elements where they can bring in as many STEM topics as possible, I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think that's right. That idea of why do we talk about STEM all the time? Well, it's that concept that, when perhaps we were at school, we were learning, physics or maths or chemistry, all separate, but that's not how it works in the real world. And if you want to be a scientist, say a research scientist, you get nowhere without maths, and you'll get nowhere without computing skills and programming and all those types of things. So everyone now needs to be a data scientist. Everyone now in the world pretty much needs to understand how to interact with digital systems and interact with technology and use mathematics and use technological tools to actually conduct that. I mean, if you run a small business, you got to get your spreadsheets out and do your taxes, right? Everyone's got to do that. So how do you actually go through life anymore without those skills? It's not going to work.
Absolutely. And I
Um,
guess the other thing I was just going to say, Lisa, is that there's a misconception that STEM is equally weighted in every aspect. So the science doesn't have to be 25%, the technology doesn't have to be 25%, or the engineering 25%, or maths 25%. It's what actually suits the topic. And so sometimes it could be more heavily technology focused, and it could be very less in the mathematics, or it could be more science focused with a little bit of technology, and there might not be a building or an engineering component, but there could be a tiny bit of math. So I just wanted to say that the STEM is not equally weighted, and it's not necessarily, science is not the priority, then T, then E or M. It can be in any order and in any weighting.
yeah, that's it. It's about problem solving essentially, isn't it? What's the right
Absolutely.
tool for this job? Um, Now your research and programs like Future You Australia really speak to the importance of role models. I just wanted to end with that. What would you say are really great ways to incorporate role models into STEM learning? And why is that important?
Look, role models are important in the sense that it's aspirational. And for some children, they may not have family or friends who have gone to university, or they may not be in circles where their community has professional people in there. And so the old adage of, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So having people come in and really inspire you may make you think, oh, how do I get to be that person, or how do I get to be in that role? What does that look like? What does it involve? And sometimes you don't see it. I interviewed a wonderful woman called Kim Ellis. Her name is Kim Ellis Hayes now, and at the time she was a space lawyer. Now, if you ask someone what's a space lawyer, they could tell you what a person going into space is. They could tell you what a lawyer is, but a space lawyer was something that really blew people away. And so these are the sorts of things which are aspirational, and it makes children and even adults think, what is that? How can I be it? What does that involve? And even if you just start with, what is this? And you start interneting it and you start searching it, you may come up with other ideas as well, but it's just a starting point. And so role models can actually be an inspiration or an aspiration to start children thinking about how they can actually, look at different aspects that they've never, they're not traditional or conservative jobs. And I really think it's really important. The other thing with role models is that we're very fortunate now that having had COVID. I mean, I don't know that that's fortunate, but having had COVID, we're now comfortable with having technology in the classroom and having Zoom chats, having team chats. So we don't have to have role models that are actually around us, or in our community. We can have role models from interstate, overseas, and we can beam them into the classroom and we can be people that the children can actually talk and ask questions. So our role models are actually becoming much more, in terms of finding them, much more wider. And so what that means is that we can actually aim higher, and we can bring in things that the children could be interested in or might be interested in, and having these people talk to the children without necessarily having their time to come out to a school. I mean, it's always wonderful if they can engage face to face, but obviously, the next best thing is to beam them in and have questions and interact. And I think, these are the sorts of things that really stay with children. If you don't mind me sharing, years ago, and I'm talking about 30 years ago, one of the things I did for my students, and this was in high school, was that you had the Mir space station, and it used to go around the world. And when it did a pass over Australia, and the pass would be about 8 or 9 minutes, we had set up that the cosmonauts would talk to the students at the secondary school via ham radio. And so what we did was we had the students write a list of about 8 or 9 questions. The best 8 or 9 questions were beamed up to the cosmonauts. And then when they did the pass over Australia, they had that conversation. And it was the first Australian school to talk to the cosmonauts, asking questions about IT. Now, those students will always remember that experience, and really warmly remember that. So, these are the sorts of activities. Now, I had to arrange it with ham radio operators, someone who knew the cosmonauts, things like that. So there was a few bits and pieces, but little things like that, those students still remember it. And so, these are the things that really inspire kids. And so I think it's really important that we try and reach out and think big to try and bring into our classrooms.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm remembering as well at primary school, similar thing. It wasn't people in outer space, but somebody brought a little mobile planetarium to my school. I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and I still remember it. I still remember when the lights went down and the stars came out, and it was, probably one of the foundational moments that led me to become an astrophysicist as well. So it's beautiful moments like that, and even if it doesn't, it gives kids a really lovely, inspiring moment in their lives where they think about something bigger than themselves. It's a wonderful thing to just expand young people's minds, and there's certainly a lot of great ways to do that. Through getting people into your school, as you say, zooming in, and lots of resources for that. The STEM Women database is great. There's also, of course, local universities, local businesses. You can just contact folks, and quite a lot of people are willing to spend a bit of time and talk to local schools. So that's a great thing to do too. Professor Therese Keane, I'm so sorry that's all we've got time for, but thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a really great chat, and I hope that the people beaming in online have enjoyed our chat. If you do have any questions, please type them in. If you're on YouTube, we can try and answer them. But also check out our resources, which are free, on futureaustralia.com.au as well. Thanks a lot, Therese, and
Thank you,
we'll see you
Lisa.
later.
No
Thanks a
worries.
lot.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.